Good day. I am Gerhard van Niekerk and I join you with the Bible in 1 Year team reading Genesis 7 today. In Genesis 7, we find that it's part of the Noah narrative which we read about in Genesis 6 to 9, where the focus is on God's judgment and mercy in the midst of human wickedness. It follows in Genesis 6, where humanity's wickedness prompts God to judge the earth. Noah is introduced as righteous and blameless, and God commands Noah to build the ark, and he outlines the covenant of preservation. We read in Genesis 7 that God instructed Noah to enter the ark with his family and the animals with him. The flood then begins as rain falls for 40 days and nights, and the fountains of the deep burst forth. Waters covered the entire earth, destroying all living creatures outside of the ark. Only Noah and those with him are saved, exactly as God has said. Genesis 7 is thus the fulfillment of God's warning and Noah's obedience, showing both divine justice and divine provision of salvation. We see here that God is holy and just in judging sin, yet merciful in providing salvation for those who trust and obey Him. And we cannot but declare God's sovereignty as we see that everything happens according to God's timing and plan. Please consider the following few thoughts about the text with me. First and foremost, in verses 11 to 23, I see that God's judgment is certain and thorough. What God declares, He carries out completely. Do note that the flood of water followed as God's judgment over the preceding flood of violence, sin, and evil. God did not judge immediately, but acted patiently and provided due warning, as can be seen in Genesis 6. 2 Peter 2 verse 5 also reminds us that Noah was a preacher of righteousness to the people. We also see a comparison in Matthew 24 verses 37 to 39, where Noah's days are compared to the end of times that Jesus reflected upon. The second thought is that obedient faith leads to salvation. Noah obeys God fully, and obedience brings deliverance, as we can see in verse 5 of Genesis 7. Also be reminded of Hebrews 11 verse 7, where Noah's faith and obedience were held up to us as an example. We also see that God provides a way of escape. The ark represents God's provision of safety amid judgment, and undoubtedly make one think about Jesus being our ark of safety amid judgment. 1 Peter 3 verse 20 to 21, we see that the ark represents baptism as a picture of salvation. The ark and baptism is seen and reflected to us as a picture of salvation. God's timing is perfect. The flood began exactly when God said it will, verse 10. And being in God's provision makes the difference between life and death, as we can see that Noah and his family and the animals with him only found safety inside of the ark. And it made me think about Romans 6 verse 23, where we see judgment compared to the gift of life in Christ, and John 10 verse 9, that Christ is the door to salvation. Please do consider prayerfully today with me. Do you and I take God's warning seriously? And do we trust His word? Do we walk in obedient faith, even when others do not understand? And do we recognize that salvation is God's initiative, not your and my effort? And do we choose to remain in Christ, our true place of safety? Greetings and blessings for your day.